Terminus Chapter 1. The alarm began as a low pulse inside Regina Zicard's headset, the kind that meant something had already gone wrong. Distant, then immediate. The pulse built into a shriek that vibrated her teeth. Micrometeorite storm inbound. As she stood on the surface operations site at the opening of lunar base Terminus, she tightened her grip on the cryo-tank's handholds. It loomed beside her on its cradle, a silver cylinder the size of a compact car ribbed with frost and webbed in vapor lines. Panic wasted oxygen. Focus didn't. Warning stripes flashed against her helmet visor as vapor bled from the couplings of the tank. The vapor curled in the light like threads of silk, beautiful, weightless, but wrong. Damn. 1/6 gravity and it still moves like a lumbering elephant. Easy does it. She'd learned the hard way that rushing was how people died. Regina heaved the tank toward its clamps, boots skidding as the mast fought her. If it slipped now, the mast would go. Oxygen with it. She shoved the thought aside and forced the clamp closed another centimeter. Kenji. Aft stabilizer. Lock it. His reply came sharp and broken through the comm. I'm on it. Metal shrieked behind her. The crane arm twitched, then lurched, its motors stuttering against the storm. The regulators aren't responding, Kenji said. The arm's drifting. Regina didn't look up so much as feel the movement of the weight shifting wrong, the tank no longer where her hands expected it to be. Red warnings flooded her visor. Impact window, 90 seconds. Override manual control, she said. That's against. Do it, she snapped, the word cutting him off. Before it takes the rig with it, lock it down, by hand. Her boots magnetized to the pad as the tank shifted with glacial resistance, and for one breathless moment she thought she had it, but the tank never settled. A sharp tremor struck the deck. One of the incoming grains of meteorite hit nearby. The cable whipped. The tank rocked hard against its clamps. Regina lunged. She caught the handle and slammed her shoulder into the tank. Pain exploded down her arm. Kenji, cut the lift power! Metal screamed as the tank settled half-tilted and vapor spilled like fog around her legs. The alarm kept howling into her headset, loud enough to erase everything else as her pulse pounded against her helmet collar. Kenji's voice returned, shaken. Stabilizer offline. We're out of time. Then we hold it, Regina said. Manual brace. She planted her feet, both gloved hands on cold alloy. Beyond the dome rim, the storm clawed at the horizon, static flickering like ghost light over the lunar surface. Come on, she whispered to the tank through gritted teeth. Don't you dare move. A metallic pop cracked through Regina's comms, then a sharp inhale. Kenji's voice broke through, clipped and breathless. Pressure drop! My tether's cut! Regina spun. Kenji drifted backward, boots skimming the deck as the magnets failed to grip. The silver arc of his body caught the pale dawn. 1 more meter and he'd clear the pad's boundary. No footing, no return. Regina released the tank. Hold position, Kenji, she barked, already unclipping her own tether. Regina, don't, protocol says. I said hold, she kicked off. Low gravity turned the push into a gliding sprint, the pull of her mag boots, just enough to keep her from tumbling as she launched forward. Silence pressed like a hand over her mouth. The micrometeorite siren shrieked in her helmet. Impact inbound. She locked on to Kenji's spinning form, the glint of his visor flashing back at her as distance collapsed between them. Her gloves caught his arm, just as another particle struck the pad, a spark of light and dust. The shockwave spun them both. For an instant they hung over the void, tethered only by her grip. Got you, she hissed. Kenji's arm locked in hers, both of them spinning in slow, helpless arcs. She slammed her boots down, magnets biting into the deck with a metallic clang. The spin stopped. For a heartbeat, they just hung there, chest to chest, the hiss of their suit fans loud in her ears. Stabilize your boots, she said. Kenji obeyed, lowering his feet until his own magnets clicked against the regolith plate. Systems integrity breached. Chloe's voice broke through their helmet speakers, sharp and tinny. Cryo leak detected. Get clear of the pad. Regina turned. The cryo tank was still hissing, white vapor pouring from a ruptured seam, oxygen spilling into the dark. Stay put, she told Kenji. He anchored himself, chest rising hard with each breath. Regina crossed the pad to the tank's control cradle. She slapped her glove against the manual override and forced the emergency close sequence. One lock clanged shut, then another. One by one, the valves clanged shut inside the tank's housing. The white vapor thinned. The hiss faded. Her pulse thundered inside her helmet, louder than the alarms. "Everyone's alive," she said. The words came out fast, like she needed them to be true. She exhaled hard and started toward Kenji. Together they stumbled back toward the EVA bay, boots clanging over the deck as the storm faded behind them. The outer hatch sealed behind them with a hydraulic thump. Pressure rushed in. The airlock filled with hiss and vibration as gravity returned in small, unfamiliar weight. Regina braced a hand against the wall. She turned away before Kenji could see her hands tremble. The sequence kept looping in her visor's reflection. The storm alert, Kenji's tether snapping, her override to reach him, the hiss of oxygen venting into the dark. She'd crossed the pad and forced a manual seal, slamming the emergency close command until the leak stopped. Containment stable, she'd reported. What she hadn't reported was the way she'd done it. She'd killed the tank's internal safeties, hard cut, no checksum, because the system wouldn't let her seal a compromised line with a human still on the pad. The manual was explicit about that. Safeties existed to prevent exactly this kind of decision. The readouts froze the instant she forced the override. No telemetry, no audit trail, blank data where there should have been a record. The valves had closed. The hiss had stopped. That was the proof she told herself mattered. The alarms were silent now. Her visor clock blinked 18:59. If the relay window held, she still had time to call home. Regina unlatched her helmet and drew her first full breath of recycled air. She welcomed the metallic taste. She left Kenji in medbay and walked the short corridor to the comms bay. It was a relief to find the half-dark comms bay empty. Regina's hair clung to her forehead as she put on the headset and opened the Earthlink channel. Normally she recorded messages. Safe ones, messages she could re-record if her voice cracked. Today she needed to hear them breathe. The camera angle widened, the dining table. Morning light. Robbie drifted into frame. "Hi, Mom," he said, already turning away. The ordinariness of it hit her harder than the words before. She couldn't remember if the TV had always been visible from the dining room, or if her mother had rearranged things while she was gone. "He's been watching one of those Japanese cartoons," her mother said, distracted. "What do you call them?" "Anime," Regina said automatically. She hadn't known she still remembered that. Her mother's attention slid back to the screen in the room. Light flickered across her face. This is what family looks like now, Regina thought. Fragments. Half attention. Distance pretending to be routine. "Mom," she said, "what did they say about the Valiant?" The image stuttered. Her mother's face froze. "Mom," static tore through the channel. The fault light flared red. "Storm interference," the operator cut in. "You've got 60 seconds before blackout." Regina leaned closer to the mic. "Mom, please." The channel fractured, then went dead. The photo winked out. Only her reflection remained. Tired eyes, a drawn mouth, the faint smear of lunar dust still clinging to her collar. Had she aged that much? She blinked, slow and deliberate, fighting the burn behind her eyes. Then she laughed at herself. A brittle sound. They said this would happen. Family scattered to the winds, veering toward estrangement. She and her husband told themselves this was the cost of parallel careers and necessary sacrifices. But standing there, stripped of excuses, Regina saw it for what it was, broken. "I've got to get my family back together," she whispered. "I've got to get us all home." The words hung in the air, too earnest to be safe. She straightened, suddenly aware of herself, and glanced over her shoulder to be sure she was still alone. Only then did she let the tears roll down her face. Regina moved slowly through the dim corridor, carrying her helmet. Her suit hung open at her waist, with the sleeves trailing behind her when a chime pulsed through her intercom. "Maintenance report Pentu. Regina stopped in her tracks. "Right," she whispered as she pivoted to the nearest terminal. She keyed her access code, and the screen expanded into the incident record she'd pushed out of her mind the moment she stepped off the pad. She read through the data, scanning the time logs to see that everything lined up. The override's timestamp sat there like a confession. Logging paused. Safety protocol overridden. Logging resumed. Her heart sank at the 6-minute blind spot with her name tagged to it. That's how long it had taken her to force the emergency close sequence of the cryotank and haul Kenji back from drifting into the lunar dark. Commander Whitaker would see that immediately. Every auditor on Earth would see it. Regina held her breath. She tapped the override entry where a submenu unfolded. Edit entry, retime event delete. Her thumb hovered over delete, but she stopped. It would be a pointless action. Everything else around the entry was intact. Removing the override would be the digital equivalent of carving her initials into the crime scene. She rubbed her temples. Whitaker would ask why the override hit mid-leak, why it didn't line up with the tank's normal emergency thresholds, why the leak rate data was gone, but this was clean, why she'd been outside instead of waiting for a full team. Regina swallowed. Her mouth parched. She selected retime event. A text field blinked open. She shifted the override timestamp backward by 2 minutes, just enough to match the last clean pressure reading, enough to make it look like she'd triggered the emergency seal before the telemetry crashed. Instead of knifing through protocol in a frantic attempt to save a man's life, she pressed confirm. The terminal chirped softly. The timestamp was updated, clean and crisp, as if it had always been that way. Safety protocol overridden, Zicard. Logging paused. Logging resumed. Regina closed the submenu and submitted the log. Incident report received. Queued for debrief. Regina shut down the terminal and stepped back into the corridor. The floor felt slightly uneven beneath her boots, as if the moon itself had shifted during the time it took her to move one number on a screen. She straightened her shoulders. Chloe's voice came softly through her intercom. "Regina, you should rest. Debrief's in 20. "Copy," she said. The log was already sinking to Earth. Chapter 2. Tom ran his thumb along Claudia's cheek, smooth and warm beneath his touch. The intimacy felt too easy, the way shortcuts always did. "I need to go," Claudia whispered. She was already sitting up and reaching for her clothes. She never stayed. That was the rule they never said out loud. Tom smirked, pulling the sheets tighter across his chest. Don't worry. Night watch changeover isn't until 700. You could just be getting an early start to the day, an early morning interview. Claudia stifled a laugh. An embedded reporter who's in bed, huh? Seems like a bad joke, Tom said, and meant it. Their eyes met in the low light, and as her smile faded, Tom held her gaze, despite himself, until a sharp pang hit his chest. A rap came at the door. Bridge to Commander Zickard, sir. We've got something on the scope. Tom's stomach jumped into his throat. He shot a fierce look at Claudia, who stood in her bra and pants. He put out a hand and willed her not to move or make a sound. Zickard here, solid copy, he boomed back, voice ricocheting off the walls. On my way. He turned back to Claudia. She had obeyed his death stare and hadn't moved. You should stay put until whatever this is blows over. Claudia relaxed her shoulders and settled back down on the bed, a flicker of a smile. Always on call, Commander. Tom wanted to join her. Instead, he dressed quickly like during his days as a junior officer, automatic and efficient, with no room for hesitation. He was already reaching for the version of himself that belonged to the ship. Whoever he was in this room didn't survive beyond the door. The console flared to life as he passed in front of it. The overnight logs scrolled, but he hadn't read them yet. It could wait. Captain on the bridge, the watchstander called. Blue and amber light washed over the faces of the sailors at their watch stations as the radar sweeps crawled across the displays. The blips showed a half-second behind where they should have been. Sea spray hammered the forward glass, each wave beating the frame and driving the Valiant deeper into the storm than the forecast had promised. The comms hissed with traffic. Contact bearing 085, closing fast, the watch officer said. G patrol craft range 1.5 kilometers. Tom blinked at the displays. Disbelief hardened into anger. Why wasn't I called sooner? The watch officer stammered. Sir, we thought. Don't think, report. The officer flinched but turned to his console. G patrol approaching from the northeast, speed 15 knots. Range under 1 mile and closing. No weapon locks detected. Our course is 180, drift to port 3 degrees. Tom stepped forward, eyes narrowing at the radar feed. The G contact flickered on the screen, its green blip jumping with each sweep, identification code flashing in and out. To the untrained eye, it looked like an intercept, but Tom saw the truth at once. Helm, 10 degrees starboard, Tom began. Engineering, compensate for drift. Broadcast a routine status ping. Nothing fancy, just enough to show we're awake. The helmsman hesitated, his eyes flicking to the watch officer. Sir, the watch officer said, that brings us toward their bow. If they hold course. Tom didn't look at them. He kept his eyes on the jittering blip. That's an order. The watch officer snapped back to the helmsman. Right standard rudder, 10 degrees. The deck shifted beneath their feet as the Valiant answered the helm. The radar picture wavered, then steadied. The green blip slid laterally instead of closing. The contact widened its separation arc. The illusion of pursuit dissolved as both ships corrected for the same storm-driven error. Sir, the tactical officer said, surprise breaking through his control. G patrol altering course. No weapon signature. A breath went through the bridge. Tom exhaled slowly. Good, he said. Send another ping, professional courtesy. Soft laughter followed as the tension bled away. Tom rested a hand on the helmsman's shoulder. The sailor nodded, pride and relief tangled together on his face. Compliments to their helmsman for the dance. Tom finally looked away from the scope. The bridge settled back into its steady rhythm, keys tapping, radar sweeping, the storm still there, but no longer bearing down on them. By the time Tom returned to his quarters, the storm had eased on the sea and the adrenaline drained from his body. Claudia sat cross-legged on his bunk, her hair damp from a hurried shower. So, she said, what about this for a headline? Another near miss, another anonymous hero. Tom peeled off his jacket, careful to hang it as if that gesture alone could neutralize her tone. I'd rather you quote the manual. That's not how legends are made, Claudia said lightly. You've got a story people want to believe, cool under fire, loyal to the ship, keeping the peace in contested waters. The world eats that up. He turned away, pretending to study the console. I'm not interested in being a story. She crossed the small space, the ship swaying beneath them. Everyone's a story, Tom. The only question is who gets to tell it. Tom braced, but her presence and proximity eased his hard edges like a warm bath. I just run the ship, he said. The rest is noise. Claudia smiled, taking a deep breath in. Her warm exhale fell on his lips. Then let the noise stay between us. The warmth of her mouth tempted Tom back toward the bed. Through the porthole, dawn bled pink across the sea where the moon hung bright above it. The sight pulled at him, and with it, his wife Regina flickered in his mind, sharp as sunlight on glass. Tom's stomach sank. I'd better get to work. Nah, she spoke into the nape of his neck. The ship's doing just fine. Valiant wrote it cleaner than G's ship. Their stabilizers always lag in rough seas. Tom froze and pulled away. How would you know that? She looked up. Alarm flashed in her eyes, realizing too late what she'd said. Oh, come on. Everyone reads the comparative specs. Specs that aren't published outside command channels. Tom's tone was flat and quite. Claudia held his gaze a moment too long, then shrugged with a deflective smile. Maybe someone in engineering mentioned it. Tom's stomach tightened. Engineering doesn't have access to G-Fleet diagnostics, he said. Her expression hardened. What do you think I'm doing here? Anyway, do you really think I'd jeopardize your ship? That depends, he said sharply, on what else you know that you shouldn't. Well, just remember, the world doesn't revolve around you. She shut her computer, sliding it into her bag with deliberate slowness. You're getting paranoid, Commander. I cover a lot of stories beyond just the Valiant. Sure, Tom said, but the word felt hollow. She stood and kissed him lightly, but he didn't move. The hatch sealed behind her, and the cabin suddenly felt colder, the hum of the engines louder, and his beating heart loudest of all. The console in his captain's stateroom dominated the starboard bulkhead, a curved array of glass-paneled displays nested into brushed steel, its surface alive with shifting graphs and soft blue readouts. The main screen was matte to the touch and responsive to gestures. Beneath it, old-fashioned toggles and keyed switches remained, a concession to redundancy. Tom leaned over it, the faint glow cutting hard lines across his face. The system murmured with all the vitals, environmental metrics, radar sweeps, propulsion telemetry. He spotted a single red icon among the orderly blue. Unverified transfer, source, Terminus station. He expanded the log. The timestamp showed 30 minutes ago, during his time on the bridge. The sender ID was encrypted, but the authorization key glowed unmistakably in sterile blue. Zicard T, command auth key active. Tom's throat went dry. Claudia had opened the console while he was gone. Was she snooping? Maybe trying to pull background on the G patrol. The ship specs she mentioned. But a telemetry request to Terminus? That wasn't just curiosity. That was a broadcast on a restricted lunar band. He scrolled through the packet stream. Diagnostics, timestamps, relay handshakes. Nothing overtly hostile. Just wrong. The route ran through the fleet relay uplink, skipping Earthside command entirely. The ping bypassed the proper chain. If command audited the log, it would look like he'd sent the ping. His command key authenticated the network. Tom's pulse quickened. He imagined the inquiry, the questions, the faces on the bridge when the report hit. Unauthorized transmission under the commander's credentials. It would make for a career-ending footnote. He hovered over the console controls. Trace, quarantine, delete. He could flag it, report it, start a formal investigation against her. Or he could fix it quietly. Contain the breach before anyone else would notice. Before anyone could question why she had access to his stateroom, he thought of Claudia's voice, teasing and careless. The ship's doing just fine. He clenched his teeth and selected delete node/log repair. The screen blinked once. The red icon vanished. Tom leaned back, exhaling hard through his nose. The silence pressed in, too loud. Adultery. It's a court-martial punishable offense. Tom hadn't allowed the thought to bubble to the surface until now. His little fling with Claudia could cost his family, his career, and any future career should he ever be brought up on charges. She'd done something she shouldn't have, with access to him she shouldn't have had. Now he had erased the only proof of it. On the display, the last line refreshed. Network clean. All systems stable, Chapter 3. Claudia went stiff when the sailor had come to the door looking for Tom to assess the situation on the bridge. He had turned to her. You should stay put until whatever this is blows over, and Claudia had squinted at him, studied him. Always on call, Commander. He replied with something in the affirmative, no longer playful, as he started putting on his commander's face. But Claudia knew better. He keyed the cabin door open and stepped into the corridor, passing through as narrowly as possible, lest anyone should pass by and see her in his room. Claudia exhaled and tugged at the hem of his undershirt, thin and warm against her skin. She hadn't planned to keep it on. She hadn't planned any of this. The ship rolled gently beneath her feet, a motion she usually ignored. Today, the sway underneath pulled longer, and Claudia listened for what must be a violent ocean outside. A single klaxon bleated once, then died out. He'd said stay put, as if she were some wide-eyed intern instead of a journalist with 3 embeds under her belt. The thought bruised her pride, and hurt a little. Claudia got dressed slowly, buttoning her jeans with distracted fingers. The air still carried his scent, starch, metal, and something like ozone. She picked up her notepad from the small desk, flipped it open, and read her half-finished headline, Life Aboard the Pacific's Sharpest Edge. It felt hollow now, like copy written for tourists. She crossed it out and jotted instead, GA contact confirmed? Early aggression? The line steadied her pulse, gave the silence shape. She straightened the blanket and started making the bed, then stopped halfway. She dropped the pillow like something hot. The console stared at her from across the room, still awake, still pulsing with the soft green of an open session. The Navy's rules were absolute. No unattended terminals, no civilian access. But the cursor blinked like a dare. She told herself she wasn't going to touch it. She'd promised that after the last fight about boundaries. Yet the silence stretched, filled with the low thrum of the ship's heart, and curiosity slipped its hand around her restraint. She was a reporter, not a mistress. She wasn't built to sit still while a story unfolded on the other side of a door. The screen refreshed. Words she couldn't fully parse flickered. Alert, Terminus link cache updating. The lunar base. The story that had been buried under layers of clearance and PR. Claudia rose, bare feet against the cold deck. He shouldn't have left it open. A new window expanded. A clean transmission log, simple enough that even she could read it, populated in front of her from Terminus Station Lunar Relay to USS Valiant, Navcom's node channel, restricted backhaul authorization, Zicard T, command key status, open session. Her stomach tightened. The Valiant wasn't a relay ship. It wasn't a data hub. It was a destroyer. And yet here it was, quietly listed as a live node in a lunar network that, by treaty, wasn't supposed to exist in this form at all. She scrolled. A single attachment sat beneath the log entry. Flagged auto-routed. Terminus sensor summary. Passive collection scope. All maritime emitters. Non-discriminate. Note, collection outside Earthcom oversight. Non-discriminate. Her breath caught. In the attachment, Claudia read real-time positioning data pulled from a G patrol vessel. Course, speed, sea state. Updated within the last few minutes. Tagged as passive collection. But this wasn't surveillance of GA alone. It couldn't be. This was blanket listening. Any ship, any signal, any nation that wandered into the moon's shadow. A treaty violation hiding in plain sight. Laundered through a warship's credentials, a noise somewhere down the hall made her glance at the door, heart thudding, then back to the console. But the green line stood in front of her as curiosity hardened into suspicion, and her journalist's instincts took over. The cursor blinked at the bottom of the screen beside a single prompt. Request update from source. The system waited, patient and neutral. Her throat felt dry. All she had to do was close the window, slide the cursor to cancel, step back, and pretend she'd never seen any of it. But she couldn't stop picturing her editor's face. You were right there, Claudia, and you didn't pull the thread. Her hand steadied. She exhaled. Then she pressed request update. The screen flickered once. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the console came alive. The familiar green glow of the interface dimmed into amber, and a thin progress bar crawled across the bottom edge. Ping sent, awaiting response. Claudia leaned forward, pulse ticking in her ears. She half expected alarms to blare or Tom's voice to crackle through the comm, demanding to know what she'd touched. But the ship stayed silent, steady. A series of verification codes spooled past, each tagged with both Terminus and Valiant. The names together sent a nervous thrill down her spine. She didn't understand the technical language, but she recognized what it meant. Contact. Claudia swallowed, tasting metal. Okay, she murmured, trying to sound calm even to herself. So they log everything. She stood, restless, glancing toward the door as if Tom might reappear. The console stayed dim, the cursor gone. Whatever she had woken was now buried behind encryption she couldn't open again. Claudia sank back onto the edge of the bed, the quiet pressing in on her now that the adrenaline had drained away. The console's light had dimmed to its normal idle glow, humming softly as if nothing at all had happened. Her heart was still beating too fast, but the fear began to settle into something else, exhilaration. She reached for her legal pad on the side table, flipping to a blank sheet, and began to write. U.S. Navy maintains covert link with lunar operations, possible surveillance overlap, violation of lunar treaty. The words looked ridiculous and thrilling all at once. She underlined covert twice, imagining the headline, the rush of being first. It wasn't the full story. Not yet, but it was enough to get her editor's attention. The page trembled under her pen. Her chest began to tighten, but she told herself it wasn't a betrayal of Tom. This wasn't about him. Truth, she reminded herself, lived in the gray spaces between what people said and what the data showed. She glanced back at the console, expecting maybe a warning flash or an error tone. Nothing. The quiet made it easy to believe she'd gotten away with it. The ship vibrated faintly beneath her, steady as a pulse. The idea that she could look inside the most secret machine in orbit and come away untouched filled her with a dangerous sense of competence. She tore the page free and folded it into her notebook, smoothing the crease with her thumb. A small, satisfied smile tugged at her lips. The hum of the ship had settled into something familiar again, and she realized she was still half-dressed, her hair tangled from sleep. A shower. Something normal. Something harmless. Something to account for what she was up to while Tom was away. By the time Tom returned to his quarters, Claudia had planted herself cross-legged on his bunk, her hair damp from the hurried shower. So, she said, legal pad in hand, what about this for a headline? Another near miss, another anonymous hero. Tom peeled off his jacket, as though shedding the weight of whatever had happened on the bridge. I'd rather you quote the manual. That's not how legends are made, Claudia said. You've got a story people want to believe, cool under fire, loyal to the ship, keeping the peace in contested waters. The world eats that up. He turned away, looking intently at the console. I'm not interested in being a story. Claudia's spine tingled. Had he suspected something on the console? She wanted to reel him in from his emotional island. She crossed the small space, the ship swaying beneath them. Everyone's a story, Tom. The only question is who gets to tell it. Tom braced, but her presence and proximity eased his hard edges like a warm bath. I just run the ship, he said. The rest is noise.